Right, I'm here today with Tony Blake for another fantastic podcast, and today we're going to be talking about the Ark, which you're going to be doing a course on later this year in America, I believe it is.
In Nashville.
So we'll give the dates for that at the end and how to sign up if you wish to. But why the Ark? Over to you, Tony.
In the conceiving of events which I can conduct as a seminar and invite people to and have a program and so on, increasingly I relied on just responding to an intuition or an impression. Something simply comes to mind and which has a significance. And in this case it was around the impression I got when I was very much younger and first meeting with Mr. Bennett and all that, those people of the Fourth Way, when I heard about the feeling they had after the Second World War that Europe was done for, so to speak, and they had to find, well, refuge was one possible answer, refuge where something could be preserved. But there was also the longing of building an ark. You know, it was, whatever this means, I mean, it was quite clear they were just exploring what on earth it meant. And they were aware of times in Europe, you know, when the monasteries had more or less saved civilization because there they concentrated what learning there was. And it was not just theoretical learning, but a lot of practical learning and so on. And they formed this chain of communication across Europe, which enabled literature and philosophy and science and technology and the scriptures and so on to be preserved and shared and propagated. And this was essential for the rebirth of a kind of civilization 1,000 years ago. So the people these people I knew or I'd heard about were thinking in a similar way. And so it just stuck in my mind, you know, building an ark. Then I was aware of the interpretations of the ark and the flood. As you know, most people associate the flood and the ark with Noah.
In the Bible, in the Old Testament.
That's right. But there's always another side to things, and one other side of them is, as you can these days easily discover, that just about every region of the world had its Noah story.
Had its flood myth.
Its own flood myth, and I was astonished recently to look into it and find it was China, India, North America, even Australia, all these places. So there appears to have been this global idea about a global flood, which some people have tried to deal with in a purely factual way, say looking for evidence of deluge and often coming up with these, I find, rather silly explanations of the particular features of their environment and what happens get blown up into something cosmic. But it's very curious how people from all over the world have this kind of idea. So what on earth did the flood mean? Now the flood, going back to people at the end of the Second World War, has this kind of political, social side of it. There was like the old things are being swept away, things are being dissolved, things which were secure are no longer secure. So it's a kind of metaphorical social flood, so to speak, in the short term. But globally, what could this be? And for me, the most interesting explanation of it comes from people who are in the realm of what's called maybe I get it right, archaeoastronomy, the astronomy of the ancients, and which has uncovered something which is still, of course, not accepted by the mainstream, that there were common ideas about the heavens and its influence on terrestrial affairs right across the globe, and with no obvious means of explanation of how they communicated with each other, these sorts of ideas. But to cut a long story short about all of this, it meant that the flood was an astronomical phenomena, and it had to do with this tremendous discovery of what's called the precession of the equinoxes. That is to say, the axis of the Earth as it spins and actually wobbles in a slow circle over 25,500 years. So the kind of celestial north changes over this cycle, and this means that there are, say, constellations in the sky which would be visible in one time period but not in another, and so they vanish out of sight. And it was suggested that this is visualizing a cosmic ocean, so they go under the ocean and are flooded. So the flood meant this change, because each of these constellations is like a master idea, as people casually talk these days about the age of Aquarius and this kind of thing. And this is a reflection of all of this. And with it comes the notion that when these transitions happen, they signify major changes on the Earth, and these major changes have to do with changes of mind. Maybe geological events and physical events, God knows we're seeing such things now, but what's important is there's a shift of mind. And this was an idea developed by my mentor John Bennett in his idea of epochs. It's like suddenly the gear wheel shifts and people start thinking in a different way or interpreting in a different way.
So maybe even from an astrological point of view, so you'd have the, as you say, with the age of Aquarius is now, we had the age of Pisces recently, which is why we had a different type of thinking then, like the Jesus type man, the Buddha type man, or Buddha type thinking, Jesus type thinking. Before that would have been, I think, age of Taurus maybe, or no, age of Aries, which is maybe why in the Egyptian times there was lots of ram stones everywhere, ram statues. So would that be the link you're saying here, which is why the North Star always changes as well, because it's changing. Sometimes it's been Cygnus has been our North Star, and other times it's been other ones.
I mean, it is a question of language. We know they mean the constellations, the zodiac. It's very curious why it's portrayed as animals. And this is why you see animals an essential part of the language of ancient people. And these changes from the bull, particularly the age of Taurus, associated with the early civilizations of Çatalhöyük and so on. But anyway, it's a matter of language, so people have used these animals to signify a change. And it's related personally to our psychology, because I always like the idea that what is called character in people often reflects animal types.
Yes,
it's a very old idea, a very nice idea. So there I was, bubbling away with the ark and so on, and I began to consider this thing about messages or carrying things from one time to another time, which brings us very closely to certain things which were explored by Gurdjieff, and because he was very adamant, as we were talking just now, he's saying that there were ancient civilizations or cultures who discovered things and so on, but this material, these ideas, these discoveries were lost sight of, were forgotten, because bad things happen. There are natural catastrophes, and also periodically people go crazy.
For example, he says that in ancient times they used electricity differently to how we use electricity today. That kind of thing.
That kind of thing. And this is it's a common claim by a lot of spiritually oriented philosophies, but means that he was concerned with the practicalities. How, if people understood this at some time in the past, could they have done something about it? Now there is a whole wonderful field which is like on the fringes of information technology to do with this, about the way in which people could ensure that ideas and so on were transmitted, because things get messed up. And I've never followed this up properly, but in fact there are 2 stories of Genesis in the Bible. And why do you need 2? Because if you've got 2, you've got more chance of finding out, because you've got a comparison, you see. It gives you this added information. And so there is this notion of being able to check on the information. Now there was a wonderful story or citation I came across years ago, and I can't find it. If any of you or any of the listeners know about it, you can find it again for me, I should be so grateful. It was this. It was some Jewish scholars in this story talking about some lines of text and so on. They would say, are we sure it's this, or is it that, or is it the other, you know? And the key of them said, no, wait a minute. I will go away and calculate, and then I will tell you. And why could he calculate? Because you know these texts were associated with numbers and a kind of mathematics, and so you could check on it. And I sometimes make the comparison with, I don't know how if it's true technologically now, but in the CDs there is parts of what's burnt in the CD is a checking program to check that the information on the disk is being coded correctly. And so you either insert it, you not only get the information, you've got a way of checking on the information built into it. So that's a very broad idea, but now Gurdjieff, as you know, came up with his own extravagant idea about all this, which he gave the grand name of legomenism. And he said, what would you do to ensure that something was transmitted? And his explanation is a bit tricky, to say the least, but he was a tricky person.
Yes, he wants you to think about what he's saying.
And he said, well, one thing that's interesting with a lot of people who shared this insight into it, there was the utilization of things which are in popular culture of the time, because why? And there's a very interesting reason why, because it's so to speak with people who are not so much educated, sophisticated, but they have folk stories and songs and dances and so on, and this because they tend to be conservative, to keep things as they always have been, so it's conservative. Then they say, well, now there is an elitist story in this. These special people could take this and insert something in these things which are going to be repeated, which only somebody who was really perceptive could
fathom.
Could notice and fathom. You see, it's this thing of this doing something otherwise, doing something strangely in there. That was his story. So I thought, well, let's look at all of this, and how did people? Do we know anything about how people did these things, let alone how Gurdjieff describes them? And of course there were ways, and this relates to another strand which slightly connects with the Fourth Way tradition and John Bennett and so on, particularly one of his students, Simon Waitman, and it concerns a wonderful kind of discovery which has evolved over the last 100 or so years about this widespread way of writing scriptures or meaningful text, because an example includes the Iliad of Homer and so on. A design of doing this which can enable you to insert special information. And this is called ring composition. Now, we would have time to go into it, and you need to have access to a lot of concrete examples about all of this. But there is an old way of speaking which is very simple and I think got amplified into ring composition, which is very interesting because it puts the emphasis on the middle. And I'm just going to invent something, so it's going to be very clumsy. You say, the world is dark, people are lost, the light glimmers, people cannot find their way, there is nothing to be seen. Now, I just made it up on the spot, so it's a bit clumsy, but you can see the shape of it is like A, B, C, B, A. In other words, the first and the last do it, and it all centers around the middle, the C. There's a glimmer of light. And it was a way of speaking which was quite natural, and in, say, not sophisticated speaking, but what it does is to highlight this middle. So the theme of this way of approach, as Mary Douglas, who wrote about this extensively, an English anthropologist, say, the meaning is in the middle, which is contrary to our attitude often, which is we expect to have the dramatic conclusion. But she said, no, in all these things, the important thing was in the middle. And so you get a symmetry, the beginning, first half and the second half. And now you imagine in your mind a circle, and so you're going round the circle, and in the middle of the circle, you switch to an upside down, inside out, whatever it is, and complete the circle. So this has many meanings, including like involution and evolution. And it's beautifully simple, but it has incredibly sophisticated applications. To say, people have looked at Homer's Iliad, and it follows this rule. And parts of the Bible, even somebody now studying the Quran this way, but this fascinating thing of finding in the middle. Now this is always like the touch of the Gurdjieff, you see, that special something inserted, and that point in the narrative, whatever it is, the scholars nowadays call it the turn, because you turn around, things turn around. And I mentioned Simon Waitman because he was a student, he was head of religious studies here at SOAS some time ago. And it was lovely, just a week or so he actually phoned me up. I haven't heard from him for 4 years, and he phoned me up about a little bit. He, sociality was Hindi and so on, but he studied the Masnavi, which is a great work of Rumi, and he's brought out one book about it, about the first book, and in this, I'll rush through this material because there's lots to speak about. In this he has 6 stories, and you have 6 stories going like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, described in one way, then the same story, the reverse, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, up, and then meet at the end in the latch. But the interesting thing about this is that these two sides have a different viewpoint. The stories expressed on the right are as man sees them. Stories expressed, same stories, on the left as how God sees them. But this then opens up what is in the middle. And what's in the middle is the salik.
The salik.
The searcher.
A searcher, right?
Yeah. And Simon developed this. He's one of the great love poems of Sufi literature in India from the 16th century, and shows that this vertical column where all these two sides cross makes a spectrum, and actually this spectrum contains the basic yoga practice of India. Now, even more intensely than that, a study made of the gasas, which are the hymns of Zoroaster, showed that these interconnections across the circle, in those, Zoroaster placed the elements of his new theology, which convinced the people of the time to accept him as a prophet. So there is this standard literature.
That gets across the point, but in a different way to how people are used to receiving knowledge today. It's probably a more...
It's literally the inner story, you see.
Yes. And because you're building up to it, and you're also... you're not fading away from it, but like you say, you're seeing both sides, and so seeing both sides makes you see what the impetus is all about.
And draws you into it. You see, it isn't coding in a naive sense, because you've got to really suss it out for yourself. And Simon's working on book 3, I think, of Masnavi now, which will be amazing. But you have to teach you to read in a totally different way. You know? So this is exciting, and so I thought this is getting interesting. And well, now, can we do something practical in terms of intentional transmission to the future? Because a lot of people connected with the fourth way in various ways are concerned that is it all going to fade away? When the fourth way is not popular, when there are books and so on around it, could there be something living? Then we have the example of Gurdjieff himself, you know, the astonishing thing he said. He felt he could no longer expect his students to transmit. You remember this?
Which is why he wrote the books, wasn't it?
That's why he wrote the books. I mean, this is a really staggering thing. He put his faith in the books rather than in the people. Well,
because
now,
if the groups fade away, in 100 years someone will find the books, or in 1,000, or whatever, the books will always be there.
Well, it's a better bet, isn't it? It's something like that. And it's interesting in some ways. I think just a random association, in a way. I was talking earlier about Monastery of Saint-Landry in France, you know, because of many things, including the French Revolution. I think they said about there were at least 5 times when the whole thing was closed down and the tradition was cut. And they had to remake it from the books, from the Order of St. Benedict, you know, the writings they had to remake it. So there's something doing there. But now imagine coming to the modern world, and this is something I feel for the future, with all this, which we have the love-hate relationship with these technologies. We're not just going to be doing books.
No, there's all kinds of ways of transmitting information across now.
Yeah, into the future, but it's hardly begun. Now, I got a little project with my friend who'll be taking part in the seminar, Jesai, who's a wonderful actor and theatre director. Got him embroiled in the scheme, which he called it the arousing, from the first chapter of Beelzebub, the arousing of the law. I just challenging now to come up with the theatre of the fourth way.
That's going to be very good to do. But like you say, challenging, like how do you perform?
How do you do this? I mean, often with Jesai I say, I got this idea, Jesai, and then he goes, yes, yes, and he gets the worried frown on his face, and then just carry on with you.
But Gurdjieff would love that kind of thing, seeing his work being performed. He loved the arts, didn't he?
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. We did some in Claremont recently, some of the stories from that first chapter, and people chose them and enacted them, and it just, everybody felt it so much more vividly, of course, you know, and I just remember the part I took. I played of the son of the merchant who went to Moscow to buy a book, and that's where it's got the whole hog plus postage comes from. But enacting it is engraven on my mind now. So help to do more explorations about this. But there is a feature of it which is, I mean, the creativity has to come from just people being with people and getting these strong images. But there has to be a side of it which is technological, I think. No, I don't know where that will develop. No.
When you say what you mean, like as in recording it or something?
In, say, virtual reality. You see, I was just reading an article by a man called Michael Garfield, who I just got in touch with. He's at the Santa Fe Institute of Non-Linear Studies. And it's about how the whole sense of our body will be and is being changed by VR. Because, for example, a thing which may sound like just a sensationalist gimmick, you know, on drones you can fit stereo cameras and put on a VR set, so you then become flying drone. He said, and this is what they're exploring now. You actually are assuming a different body. Wow. Now this is possibly a window to a very intense kind of communication. Yeah. An extraordinary thing about this technology is challenging such things as what our body is. Well, because everybody always assumes this. Everybody, your body, my body, we know what body is. No, there's something coming. And it's coming from technology, as you know through Eric Davis and his technosis. The kind of dreams which people have become tangible through technology, and I think this can happen too. So, how do I bring this in? I really don't know. But one, it's all several. It's multiplying in front of my eyes. This has come to our friend Matthias Ribbing, this world master of memory, and memory codes and all the rest of it, is how these, another phrase comes on my time capsules can be created. Now this brings me to movies. I always try to bring movies into my things. I don't know, probably before your time, did you ever see the movie Brainstorm?
No, don't know that one.
It was an early Christopher Walken film, and it was with actress Natalie Wood, I think it was, who died soon afterwards. Anyway, it's all around this idea that one could record experiences. And so there's some amusing things in it, how the man picks up this tape of recording of young man's intense sex sessions and plays it for 24 hours. But the gimmick is that he becomes enlightened. But then there's also this woman, this scientist, who records her own death. And it just is beautiful depiction of all these little capsules beaded in this hyperspace of these moments of experience, you see. And so that's the sort of thing I'm going to come in. And I just show these sort of things, just how wild my associations are. And I'm also going to draw an avatar. Why Avatar? Because of the tree. Do you remember the tree in Avatar? Did you ever see it?
And I've never seen the film. I'm one of the few people that never saw Avatar.
Oh, well, it's incredible because of the metaphysics in it. Because he is tapping into what's come out with modern appreciation through people like Sheldrake and so on, about what happens under the forest floor. This old idea of ecology is old. I mean, it's just passé. This interweaving of this communication between trees is just absolutely amazing. This is so they literally, and I'm beginning to think that trees can help each other and talk to each other. And it involves, it involves the fungi and the bacteria, and we give these names to them. But the thing is, these old ideas have got these different organisms interacting isn't inadequate, isn't it? Because they're not the separate things interacting. There's something else happening, and people are trying to find the language for it, you see. So there's that sort of thing, and then I'm going to bring Contact, the movie Contact, when they sent a message which tells them how to build a machine to make contact with the aliens. You see, what on earth has this got to do with the Ark? Well, it's sort of do these profound messages. You see, I talked about the body. People assume they know what the body is. Okay, there's the body is flesh, cells, organs, blood. Yeah, you know all that, no? Oh no.
Because the ark's carrying all the animals in, let's say, the Noah's story. So we're talking about an ark that's carrying all the information.
Yes, but as somebody remarked, just Noah's a bit backward. He had no plants he carried with him. What was about all the plants? You see, at least we got in the Arctic Circle. I think it's in Norway or Finland. Is the incredible sea bank, which is there's a genuine ark, of the biosphere, which is carried there.
Well, I did ask someone about that once, and he said that the seeds, Noah wouldn't have to take plants or seeds on because seeds would survive a flood once the flood had abated, they would still,
Oh,
they don't drown like animals do. Which I'd never thought of before. It's like, oh yes, they probably would. Or they'd float on the sea until
Well, that's if
land
you take,
came
of course,
back.
take the flood literally. But I want, see, I get this thing about communication, because the ark is a very solid, because it's a solid, substantial picture. You get people and the animals, whatever it is, and it's a boat, and it's a vessel. And, oh, by the way, just a detour about the word, of course, you've got the Ark of the Covenant, and there's something I haven't really followed through about the Ark being a word which means like container, in general. So, and the Ark of the Covenant is supposed to contain things like a sample of the food of manna, the food from heaven, and Aaron's rod, and all that sort of that missing. And this then links. See how I dart around from this to that, people who work with me are very patient. What's he on about now? This wonderful Tibetan tradition of the, I hope I got the word right, the termas, or the treasures. These so resonate with Gurdjieff in a certain way, because the masters would sort of create a tama, treasure, which was to be discovered by wise people in the future, and gives them something they needed at that time. And this was inbuilt into that Tibetan tradition.
Because they knew that everything doesn't stay the same.
Doesn't stay
Things
the same.
change, and like we were saying earlier, things get lost.
Yes. This term could be sutra, but how should I say, sometimes it could be a vision, it could be a dance, it could be a cure, for a medical cure, any kind of thing. But one justification for mentioning was, with all those different examples, you see, but what is the message? How is it being carried? We can get stuck on your idea, like these silly ideas, the mystical cave somewhere contain all this information, or it's in a chest somewhere, and see what sort of image do they have this information. Is it like something like, and Gurdjieff plays with this, of course, this is some kind of secret book or something. It's rather like in the crude martial arts Chinese movies, you can get, they have to find this book which tells them how to do it, this kind of thing. But as Gurdjieff was hip to that, saying, no, the people didn't just use words, they did it in other ways, like from dance and so on. But I'm ringing and say, what form can the message take? And that's my justification for throwing in this other big element, which is music. I really get mad with people. I was speaking to earlier, may have been a bit exaggerated perhaps the same nowadays. It's enraged we've talked about liking or disliking this or that kind of music. I think it's so childish. Like music is music, whatever it is. And it is intrinsically beyond like and dislike. And then the usual approach to music, this is emotional, conveys emotions. Again, I'm sorry, I get annoyed by this. It's not just emotions. You see, this is not. There is communication, and I recited to you, of course, Beethoven's remark, there's more in the symphony than in all the philosophies, and so on. He meant it absolutely intensely, aggressively. This was true, but people don't recognize it. Well, music is there just to affect our emotions. I say, oh, if you use that language, the music is there to affect your emotions. You've lost the plot. Well, and all that. There was, when I was at Bristol University, there was a cybernetician who gave this spurious explanation about music. You like music gets you, if it produces brainwaves which you find pleasurable. And I thought, you idiot, you moron.
But isn't that how most people do look at music? If they
They
like
do,
it
but
by
it's
how
wrong.
it's feeling, how it makes them feel.
But this then becomes, you may not accept this, it becomes a conditioned response. Whereas you build up, So a cycle of building it up is a kind of self-conditioning which happens. And also sometimes associated with memories, of course, and this kind of thing. Oh, they're playing on a song, that kind of thing. But that's a very serious issue we're coming from. Now, I was speaking to you about my old friend and colleague, Ted Matchett, and how he developed a little bit from me, but it was his insight, of course, because both of us adored music and sound, because we like natural sounds as well as classical music and popular music. He developed this as a way, a method. That is to say, he actually took on board the idea that music was intelligent. And this simply like suddenly comes up with a nice tune which people like.
It moves you in a certain way that makes them really happy and elated.
Yeah, and you can, people who really desperately looked into what is the meaning of music and got into the intersubjectivity of it and how the same piece of music, one person can render them into tears, another one into elation, another into peace, another into sorrow. So I say, music is intelligent. Now, what intelligence is not a flat record. It's not a page. Yeah. Why? Because it's all the time moving. You get that? And sometimes it touches you and you think, what my friend Ted was after in this is how this could, it's like making use of a transformer. So there's this high octane stuff you call media, which is picked by people we call composers, and they transduce it into audible sound, and so we can participate. And then another friend of mine used to say, listen to the music, you see, what you do is like a very fundamental Gurdjieffian idea. You switch from involution, which is the right hand side of the circle, to evolution.
She's going back.
You see, you get a descent, into the audible realm, but you can climb the ladder backwards. The way up and the way down are one and the same, for your magical studies, you see. So you imagine climbing the sound back to the source. So you get to the point of being with the composer as he's composing the music. Now, you can take this as just a fancy. But sometimes haven't you felt it, don't you? You're there as the music was being made. It's not just an artifact coming to just tickle your funny bone.
It's not just a feeling or an emotion that's happening with you, you're part of it.
You're part of it, but what is it? What is it? It's it literally is. I mean, you're going to laugh at me, it was the best, because we're all floundering around these words. It's like being with the angels. This is, strictly speaking, the angelic realm. This was very explicit in the Middle Ages because their early songs and so on were intentionally supposed to be expressive of the angels, consciously, And then, of course, we forgot it. We were more interested in our misery and, sufferings and bing-bangs and doings and all that sort of thing. Those human emotions, so much. But then you think, is this absurd? And I think, so I'm going to have some of that too. And with this marvelous pianist, Ruben, who is half Armenian, and we got it off, so I'm just trusting in him that he can respond to my vague ideas and say, let's introduce people to listening.
And Darlene as well should be performing, won't she?
Yes, with it. And Evidently, she's just drawing on another source. I don't know if you've ever heard of a man called Richard Powers. He's a novelist. He was an incredible man. And this book she's reading now, Orfeo, is based on the idea of a composer who wants to go beyond expected patterns, and there's a tragedy of his life and so on. But she's finding some things in this about it. But going back to these things about the body, about music, which everybody assumes they know what they are. And for me, the work, what we call the fourth way, is always probing away at these things. Saying these things you're taking for granted and assuming are a veil.
Because it's not I, it's it.
It, yes.
Or a different version of you liking it one day And tomorrow a different version of you will be like, I don't like it.
There's it reminds me of this my favourite saying of Bennis, John Bennis, and it was very expressive what he was after in all his efforts to communicate. People say things in different ways, and all his big books and his talks and all that. And he said, there are not beings who do things, there are doings that be things.
Okay, I have to ponder on that, but it does seem to make sense. Yeah.
You see, the ordinary everyday view of things is like you and I, we are people, we got ideas, we do things, you see. And then there's this material world which is based on causality and the rest of it. But always there's things doing things. But, you've got to have something to do something. You've got to have an agent to have an action. But turn it on the head, no, the actions are primary. And what we call you and me and so on are just a precipitate in this action, out of the action. And he's absolutely spot on, he's actually right. But we're in this phase, in this time of flood, you see, making transition from that, where the, because it's broken up the world, it's the different classes in society are part of it, different races or groups are part of it, and it's all based upon, to say all based upon is a bit extreme, but it may be suggested by saying that it's all about the starting everything from me, or I. And this is not saying, one shouldn't be egotistic, or one should shun the ego, because you can't do that anyway. It's just this understanding of I do, is screwing up the world.
We should all be working together as a...
And now, you see, not even working together, because, you see, not even saving the planet, because it always assumes it's starting from these separate organisms as you and me. And I think you look at, it's not really going on like that, you see.
So is it like a connection instead?
Connection is getting there, but it's even beyond that. I've been saying, Debbie, about language, and of course, a lot of people feel this in the words are inadequate. Not to blame the words at all. No, I think one of the great human tasks is words. You feel this too. And I was quote here the Ezra Pound translation of Confucius, to render into words the inarticulate, the still tones of the heart. But it's to bring into expression what has not been brought into expression. And that's a critical thing, because all the time, see, what's running the world are habits of language. Mm-hmm. And I say to you, watch what you're saying. All the time you're either putting a nail in your coffin or you're gathering a feather to fly with. It's kind of...
Well, words are a very powerful thing, aren't they?
Yes.
And again, they're vibrations, because it's voice going out. So if everything is vibration as we speak, we're affecting things. And if we're using nasty words, surely that's sending out a dull, negative, perhaps vibration.
Yes.
And you're doing nice, happy vocabulary, then it's going to do a nice, peaceful, loving, happy vibration out.
True, but can I say, it's more than that. If you can change your language, your world changes. You live in a different world. People think, this is absurd. And they might be imagining you just take on board a few funny words, extra words. No, it's the way you're speaking. The whole thing. But to repeat, go back to my earlier suggestion, I do feel it strongly. It just hurts me sometimes. People say they don't realize that making them die by the way they speak. Themselves die, their spirit dies by the way they speak. They don't value language, and a lot of people say, no, words are inadequate and so on. Well, this is infamous. This is can't just turn your back on it, but you don't have to have a big vocabulary, but it's the way you say it.
And perhaps understanding what you're saying.
Well, for me, the understanding comes almost afterwards.
Right. Okay.
It's a bit to exaggerate the point. so you can, well, maybe you can see, and maybe I'm claiming too much that it's too a strong connection when there's so frail the connection from the ark and launching the ark across the flood and so on, is what can do it. And if I get to language, it seems very far away from our picture of an ark. And imagine that, can we exemplify the ark by a kind of poem? You know, I think this is a bit weird, it's a bit stretching, but I want to stretch it to that extent, because I've always had this strong conviction about revelation and so on, you know, that the fact that somebody can say something in a way it's never been said before really does change everything. It's not like having another opinion, not like having another explanation, it's just something natural.
Well, it's a new way of thinking, isn't it?
Well,
So that's
yes,
going to
it's
break
really-
boundaries.
That's right, the thinking comes in, because I tend to emphasize speech because it has this physicality about it, you know, as I'm speaking now and so on. It's not it's not some, almost I could go to extremes and say, well, just forget about thinking altogether. That's an imaginary activity going on, you know, everybody assumes they're thinking, but nobody's hardly thinking at all. But speaking, we know that people are speaking, you know.
Because we can hear it.
We can hear it, you know, and tangibility. And you've got these fanciful words now, like embodied cognition. And I want to say, well, let's get down to it. It's speaking. You once you get the idea, I mean, belief or faith or feeling, you know, that one doesn't have to go on saying the same things. And this is quite something. I used to have this slogan, never think the same thought twice. And you can say, well, that's stupid, how can you live up to that premise? But it's really been very important for me, you know, because I always get to say, oh, here it is again. Here it is, you know. And it may go on in my, you know, occupy me, go on, not let me go, but something inside me knows this is not the McCoy.
But then that's quite good, because then if you're not going to have the same thought twice, you've got to really pay attention that first time and understand what you're thinking.
Yeah.
So that is a very good thing.
Yeah.
I like that.
Oh, yeah. I really hope so. So, you see, my picture of the ark has got rather, how to say, multicoloured or very full, many strands to it. Because I want to take it as a point of departure, and this may lead me to the final things I want to say about it, but it's a much more difficult thing. And as I say, you see, again, we split things up. You see, if I propose something, this is about the ark, people want to say, well, what can you tell us about the ark? What does the ark mean? Where can I find one? And all this kind of thing. And I say, well, no. Whenever you raise something, a subject, like you're saying, you are raising everything. It just so happens you take that as your point of departure. But always it's the same thing. And I can say, well, what do you mean, Mr. Blake? And I think, well, because it's the human being. Yeah.
You could go in any way.
We'll go there, but whatever we touch, you know, it's that same reality, you know, kind of thing. And of course you can't perceive by directly, let's just take everything into account. No, you start from something. There has to be the something as a point of departure. And I got enthralled by this image of the ark, and of putting a few things out on Facebook, as you know, and some people have picked up on it, and all their various ways. And all this variety matters because I've given up on the idea of tying it all together, wrapping it up into a nice, new, neat explanation. And it's why for some years now I used to bristle at the phrase, the new paradigm. Because it meant to me that people were looking for a new comfortable conditioning to replace the old comfortable conditioning. The new paradigm was just another rule book. It was also a death. I mean, then they could be pompous and say, oh, we are the lead proponents of the new paradigm. And all these people doing these conferences. I won't name names, you know, here we are, the leaders of the new paradigm. And they weren't. They were usually all fuddy-duddies.
But doesn't having this kind of thing that, like you say, it makes you feel safe and comfortable in what you are, but then you're not open for change.
Not open for
and nothing
change,
should be,
yeah.
everything should be open, shouldn't it? Because things develop.
Should. Well, there's a kind of hope for there. But let's also face the fear. And it just hit me when you were speaking then. I say, well, you know, with this being me, whatever happening, God knows what's happening in me, with this sense of, you know, your whole, well, my sense of identity has just gone, into obscurity. You know, you start, well, I say you or one or we, in this whole space, because these wonderful ideas, having one's real life, becoming master of oneself. You think, that sounds like a good scheme to me. Yeah, I'll have some of that, you know.
Well, we all want to be developed to be the best that we can.
Well, no, speaking of you, but speaking of myself, if I only get there and say, well, to quote Rumi again, he has this wonderful phrase, and he talks using a sort of metaphor, and he says, when they finally lift the lid, they will say, this is not what we expected.
Always expect the unexpected is one of my mottos.
Exactly right. Well, there is a class of me that's, I find myself speaking for myself existentially. The effect of going in this way times is quite daunting and scary. And there is fear in it, because you lose your sense of identity. So nice to be, you know, Tony Blake who does this, that and the other, and he can pontificate in this, that and the other way. But it's been years in the same. It is a sham. It is just, you know, we call it personality, and you can. But it's not so simple. Oh no, I'll get rid of personality. No, you don't get rid of personality at all.
It becomes another personality, doesn't it? Doesn't another one pop up?
Exactly. But there's something, this understanding, this way of doing things, and you know, it's this. You actually do live in a different world, and I have a lot of respect, you know, my mentor John Bennett, how this constant labour, it was conscious labour, I think it was, trying to find the words to express to people what it was to live in other worlds. So this is on and on he went, and always, not always, but often, or doing what he best to try something new. So here I am with the Ark, and including all these elements, including, let's say, my dear friend Travis Jalal, who is a dancer, and he has special knowledge of dances of Uzbekistan and so on. And she tells me she has a dance which is related to the theme. So I can't wait to see what she does about all of that. But just to add and complete the list, I mentioned the Tibetan school, and here I'm going to use a word which I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce. It's a Dzogchen, which is this way of non-meditating meditation, direct awareness, and because I want my friend Michael White, who is the secretary of the university, he's got many years of Tibetan masters, and talk about this tradition of the terma, the treasures, and have you able to say, with a very difficult challenge about you see behind the treasures in this transmission is the idea of the direct mind transmission, which requires no artifact at all, you know, between master and pupil, also across centuries, which Bennett himself exemplified. I never dared to interrogate him about this, but I still see it in his house and was with him in the kitchen. He was talking about his most important teacher, Zubayd al-Akhra, the Khwajagan, who died in the early 17th century, and he was telling me, you know, it was obviously meant, it was direct. that he was dead didn't matter. I never had the guts to say, what the fuck do you mean? You know, can you explain it to me? You know, this is just some fantasy. I don't know. I said, this is what he said. Well, that's this, and it's happenings. So when you get two worlds of the world, which is this, and it seems both of them we need as well, the direct and the indirect, direct transmission. This, like there is these, you get this thing of the transmission beyond the scriptures, then you get the transmission beyond the mind, and they were very aware of these subtle worlds in which you can't just get rid of one of the levels, they all have to be somehow involved and so on. So this is, the arc is then, so to speak,
so it's carrying all them different transmissions. So if somebody went on, they might find the transmission that suits them at first, that would then perhaps lead to the others.
That's true. It's true. Like he, can't resist throwing in now. So you see because one of the more modern elucidations or expressions of the arc is, of course, our own planet. As Buckminster Fuller called it, spaceship Earth. The Earth itself is an arc, which is exciting and appalling at the same time, because it's such a fragile thing.
Yeah, this arc, this Earth, is carrying all of us.
Yeah.
We are the little animals being carried along. Our safe haven is the ark, is the Earth.
Indeed.
Or as we were saying earlier, the water world.
Yeah. Yes, the water world. And it's the, what is it? I don't know. Well, this is what I want, which, indeed, listen, I don't know if I'll be able to do it because I've tended to develop the seminars so they're full of activities and incident and so on, and I hardly ever give any time to questions and answers, because I think it just feed formatory apparatus, as it calls, so to speak. But what I'm also very concerned with, people have got to find their own voice in it.
Yeah, because your seminars and courses are normally about for developing yourselves. Okay, you're giving them that extra, step up, I suppose, of finding themselves, helping them to look at themselves in a slightly different way than maybe they would have normally.
They'll make it more dimensional, like in Clement had, say, theatre, had movements, had music, and talks and inner exercises and media. And as we talked about it together today, about through participation, you participate in these things. So it's a good, gentle way of education, because you have to sort of give way in yourself. You can't just impose on them your likes and dislikes. So I still get people saying, well, I like that session, didn't like that session. But I think, again, how childish, you may seem strange, but how childish that is. Of course, anyway, of course we do like things more than other things, but it's so secondary, because it's also important to have these things which you don't like. Why? Because that's life, baby.
Yes, it is.
Isn't it? Yeah. And, it's really got up my nose. Well, great. But still, yeah. And I hate when you get post-mortem and say, this bit was good, and people didn't like that bit, and people like that bit, so we'll get rid of that bit and do more of that bit. It's useless.
That's why I won't fill out feedback forms for anything. What's
Good
the
for
point?
you.
I've experienced it.
Yeah.
My
And-
experience is not going to be the
and
same
that's
as the
what
next person's.
Imagine they're going to tinker with it from the outside. It's like putting it in the hands of bureaucrats, isn't it? Not the living artist, you just deal with it. It's like that famous scene in Amadeus where it's not historically true, but Bach Mozart gets accused of having too many notes. He did too many notes, just too much notes were needed, that kind of thing. Well, let's make it better by getting rid of something. all that kind of thing. So it is about it, but I want hopefully to get, because I've almost, for me, Debbie, even though I've kind of dominated this exchange we have. It is, I mean, the ultimate thing is to be conversation. For me, that's the most sacred thing. Because I mean, I do think we live in an era where reliance on teachers, as it's been, is now kaput.
That could be because it's the end of the Piscean age.
Yeah.
Going back to what you was talking about at the beginning, when that was all about being the teachers, where Aquarius is about doing it yourself.
There you go. There's a good exemplification. Because between one and the other, there's a lot of confusion, and because it's like, you know, I have this very primitive image of the motorways. When you start improving the motorways, there's a hell of a lot of chaos. No, you know what it's like. Everyone knows what's that like. So it's like in I think the psychological world. I mean, all this stuff about teachers and teachings and exercises and so on, I think it's all up for radical review.
We need them to start us off and get us going, and then really, like Gurdjieff used to do, he used to let his students go and say, off you go now. But I think that we do need teachers, but we don't need to be with them forever.
Well,
or teachers should be like you do. All your seminars are very different. You don't seem to repeat anything. So that's quite, fingers crossed, yes. No, you don't. You're fine on that kind of thing, where many teachers just regurgitate what they taught the year before and things
awful.
like that.
It's awful. And also, yeah, because you feel like you feel like we're touching like on the edge of something so thrilling, and you don't need to cling on to these things from the past. You know, even think wonderful things like the movements and all the rest of it. I mean, so Gurdjieff was a creative genius. He invented these beautiful dances. That's fine. We don't need to cling to them. A lot of people just cling to them.
Do you not think that they do go well with the books, though?
Oh yeah, there's a lot to be said for them, but they don't get, you know, because there is, I feel, a kind of formulaic tendency, because I used to get fed up in years past with Bennett people and so on, you know, morning exercise, practical work, movements, meditation, whatever, and it's just.
Did you, in them days, still read Beelzebub's Tales as part of the group, or did they not do that?
Oh yeah. I mean, Bennett was always reading. Well, Bennett was when I was always reading Beelzebub's Tales, and when he died, I took it on. That's what led me to eventually making all the recordings. Yes, he because he loved Beelzebub's Tales, and liked it very much. So
that could work well if you're doing like exercises and movements and reading the book every day.
Yeah, that's it too. But I'd be very radical here, Debbie, about it. You could drop it all and still carry on. You see, just because the old guy said, look, the forms arise according to the needs of the time, and once it's done, it's done, and you can start all over again. Well, and it's beautiful, Hippocrates. I was just briefly pondering today about Ashata Shimash, you know, and he's thinking how to get it to work, whether it was this plucking the hair from his chest over the 40 days and this kind of thing. But I thought it was just being inspiring again. He just isn't kind of handed the golden papyrus, you know, with Moses coming down from Sinai with the tablets and all saying, this is what you got to do, chaps. Well, you know, he just work it out, Boyle, and he just ponders about it, and he comes up with this thing which is still one of the most extraordinary treatments ever of the transmission, because in a way there was no teaching in it, in the sense. There was just this convincing of people of the reality of the conscience within them. I think it's the most astonishing thing, you know. But then Gurdjieff goes on to say, well, that was not enough, and we need to do something more. You see, he's going on to the next thing. Well, it was this, what he challenges us with in Ashita Shimash is saying, this man face what is the task? You know, and people replace this by, what have people done in the past which have been called spiritual? Let's do that. That's different. But when you start asking what the task is, you're in the workshop. And again, this metaphor from Rumi. And you get serious about the work. You no longer spend your time gazing in the shop window. You go into the workshop. And in the workshop, things are not so tidy as they are in the shop window. Shavings on the ground, you know, things half done. You know. This is what the workshop is like. And you don't need any, because my limited exposure and so on, just thinking of my friends in Spain. And the last time I went to the East or so, and I just so much enjoy meeting the people, and I just an incredible experience they have doing all kinds of things. Oh, all kinds of strands, you know, they know about this kind of meditation or theatre workshop, and God knows what they're doing on yoga, and all this immense variety. And it's something that Bennett was concerned with all his life. Because he kept on, you know, he conveyed to you, Debbie, about all this. He wasn't, of course, he inherited all this stuff from Gurdjieff, these various practices, and trying to make sense of them. But he was always open to these other things of quite different nature. Why? Because he thought it was axiomatic. You become, in this way, you don't get handed the manual. This is what you do, you know. You get handed, what is it, something like a blank sheet. It's like, what's it all about then? You know? How do you think what Bennett did? The radical changes, even the step towards Subud, which freaked people out immensely, into the Catholic Church, into Shivpuri Baba, into Shah, into Hassan Shushu. Oh, people mocked him, said, oh, poor bugger, he can't make up his mind, you know, he just dilly-danting around, you know. But we know because he was able to say it all has to be done in this time.
Well, people like to put things into boxes, don't they? And they want to say, well, you're into this and you're into that.
Yeah.
And why should it be like that? That's just making them feel secure.
It is. It is so true. I think all we can do to just, you know, refrain from boxelitis.
Boxelitis, that's brilliant.
Yeah, you know, you get a, perhaps you can get a vaccination. Well, that's even another thing. But it's, and it's because those real people have a taste of it. It's like they, you see, we start by being human. You know, just accepting that. Let's see. It's a hint from the past called in Bennett's own 7 lines of work. The 7th line he called acceptance, which you just absolutely accept everything that happens to you as God's will, completely. And it's the ultimate mysticism. But it's also in this Dzogchen Tibetan tradition. You see, you don't do an artificial practice at all. You just, it's in real life, every moment, all that kind of thing. And have something's coming to me these last year or so about this around this question of, you know, what is it, why? Because we know just a few people get turned on by the Gurdjieff work, a relatively small proportion get turned on by it, and I think, well, why do those people take it seriously and other people don't? I don't know. But Bennett was always very clear, people don't have to kind of embrace Gurdjieff's idea to be in the work or whatever it is, because the work is the work, and it has its own logic. It's not according to any formula whatsoever.
And Gurdjieff would agree with that.
Well, I think he would agree with that.
Because he said it's not about him, the man, don't adore him.
Of course, the bugger, he'd always play both ends against the middle, because he'd always talk about how wonderful he was and how his ideas would save the world and all this kind of thing. People go, yeah. But this is it. I think it's only, I got this kind of belief, it's only by since throwing it all away that we can find out what really sticks and to carry on. This it's this mysterious thing. Maybe I'll put pen to paper about it one day and scribble some nonsense, but it's what I call, I'm just thinking about today in Venice, simple little words he used. They called it concreteness. Everybody's sort of, but sometimes I go back to it and I go, wow! In a sense, he never explained it, but it was ultimate for him, because it was like this. He was saying that, but he was always saying, extolling these worlds, these triads and these levels of being and energies and essence classes and blah blah blah. And then he got, and he was like following a scent or something. And he said, well, then you come to what he called the present moment. And be very careful about this present moment. It's like, people talk about the present moment, they go, here now. It's not that here now at all, it's quite different. It's for him, is the realm, is the sphere of action of a will. And what makes this present moment he called coalescence, and it was just a sense of this here and now individual is not a pale expression of something universal or eternal. It's actually a stepping into concreteness, and that the whole universe is getting this more and more concreteness, this realization. And you sometimes get near to this in one way in science with its progressive approximation, another in art, where the true great work of art is something permeates right down to the merest atom of it, it goes right the way down to it, and it's not just on the surface, it permeates, it's like Brighton Rock, it's got the word goes all the way through it, this kind of thing. And there's something about that concreteness, and he gallivanted about Weizsäcker about these wonderful worlds and the ultimate and the unfathomable and the world of this and that and World 12 and 6, and he enjoyed doing all of that, but then he always tried to come back to Earth, because that's what matters, just us being here uniquely in this moment. And it's just that which is ignored as just accidental, contingent. It's not about important things, it's just what's actually happening.
In the now.
So, the ark, I feel it is, which I won't be consistent, of course. I was thinking like, now I'm picturing the ark as a kind of sort of Hopper's journey being transformed into something else, like an ugly duckling turning into a swan. or it's the nature of the ark itself is changing. Yes. So in the seminar, I hope people come along in the spirit of letting their hair down and just not caring if it makes sense too much.
And if they want to come to the seminar, where will they find out details to sign up?
Well, it is on the website, which is www.duversity.org, and it's on the home page. I've got a reference to the ark, and it's got all the signing up details and so on. I believe the dates are September 19 to 22. I hope to God I got those right. And that's a Thursday night to a Sunday lunchtime in the city of Nashville, which is one of the cities of music.
In USA.
Of the USA, indeed. But the more the merrier, I hope. Another favorite metaphor of mine is the caravanserai. So people come are doing journeys and we just hang out together for a while, swap yarns, and then carry on across the desert. Well, thanks, Debbie, for giving me this space again. It's very kind of you.
My pleasure, Tony. It's always a joy to speak to you, and good luck with the seminar later on this year. Thank you.
Yeah.